Of advocacy group Right2Know were forcibly removed from the SABC in Auckland Park today. They were staging a sit-in to support 4 journalists who were barred from entering the premises this morning. Right2Know's Micah Reddy joins me now on the line. Good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us, Micah. We'll get to the breaking news story shortly, but we understand that you were forcibly removed by the SABC security. Tell us what happened there.
Well, as you said, we staged a sit-in in support of the 4 journalists who earlier today were barred from returning to work as per a court order that said that their dismissals were to be set aside and that they should be returned, that they should be allowed to return to work right away. So that sit-in was in support of them. We staged it in the SABC's foyer at Radio Park. And then were forcibly removed by SABC security. And
what was the reason given for you being removed?
Well, there was mention of the fact that the SABC is a national key point, but because we were being disruptive, we were quite loudly drawing attention to the injustice against the 4 journalists.
When you say you were quite loudly, doing so, what were you doing exactly?
Well, it was a sit-in, it was peaceful. We were in the foyer area, so a lot of SABC staff witnessed this. But yes, we were shouting for the reinstatement of the journalists.
So obviously now, you've just heard the news now that 4 of the journalists that were barred have now been allowed to get into the building and to work. Have you spoken to them at all? And what is your reaction then to that, to the fact that they are now being allowed back inside the SABC and to resume their duties then?
Yes, I have spoken to them. Of course, there's a lot of relief. This is another resounding defeat for SABC management. They've been forced to backtrack yet again on an idiotic and unjustifiable decision that was taken. Much like with the protest policy and the ICASA ruling that we witnessed recently. That said, one of the 8 dismissed journalists remains out in the cold, locked up from SABC and prevented from returning to his work. That's Vuyo Mvoko, who was on a freelance contract. That said, he was dismissed for the same reasons, and his dismissal stemmed from unlawful policies that were at odds with the broadcaster's mandate and that were plainly unconstitutional. So he should also be reinstated. We will continue to demand his reinstatement. An injustice to one is an injustice to all in this case. But again, this is an important victory. Obviously, quite clearly, the SABC management was keen to avoid having to answer difficult questions in the Constitutional Court. It has no leg to stand on. The cracks are growing wider and wider. But we hope that the journalists who return to work will be allowed to go about their jobs freely. We suspect that this won't be the case because there is a stifling climate of fear and intimidation at the public broadcaster. And we suspect that they will face great difficulties practicing journalism and going about their work on a day-to-day basis at the public broadcaster. The deep underlying issues still need to be addressed. Management needs to be held accountable. And we need to see a real turnaround at the SABC.
I mean, Micah, you've touched on it briefly, and I suppose this is a question I'd like to pose to Solidarity as well when I get to chat to them later. And it's whether, what will happen in a case where, the journalists are now back at work, and then the conditions that they're working under are then unbearable because there are those who don't want them there in the first place. I mean, we saw the fact that they were being barred from entering the SABC in the first place today. I mean, as you say, it's probably likely that their working conditions won't be great. So what will then happen on your side then?
Exactly. It's very hard to say. We know that there are all sorts of ways that management and those loyal to the Hlaudi Motsoeneng and cabal around him can make life very difficult for journalists, especially for journalists who have the courage to speak out and to go about their jobs and to hold power account and produce good, hard-hitting, critical journalism. And there's a very much a need for that, especially right now as elections approach. So yes, it remains to be seen how they will be treated when they go back to work. But we won't be surprised if they continue to face intimidation and if obstacles to prevent them doing their jobs are put in their way every step of the way, because this is what has come to define the working environment at the public broadcaster. We will keep a very close eye on things. We're going to continue putting pressure on the SABC, engaging in direct action to make sure that the deep underlying issues are addressed. It is the current management and the board has crippled our public broadcaster. And it is a serious blow to democracy when a public broadcaster has been turned into a mouthpiece of a faction of the ruling elite.
All right, Micah, thank you very much for giving us your time. That was Right2Know's Micah Reddy.